No, I'm really excited to speak with you. I think of you two as such a dynamic producing duo. You guys went from one of the biggest blockbusters this summer to producing such a fun horror film. What is it like working together? Was it, for this project specifically, did it come together really nicely, or is it a well-oiled machine by now? How was it working with you two?
We wish it was well oiled. Well oiled between the two of us, but every movie presents its own challenge to getting made, and
In Montreal things.
it's shooting in Montreal during COVID presented a real. It's really true.
Yeah, we had Transformers shooting and Pet Cemetery shooting in Montreal at the same time during COVID.
Yeah.
And we have another movie that we couldn't get to because of quarantines and whatnot. But we're working between these two movies, shooting this in the countryside outside of Montreal, and a lot of Transformers in the city, and swapping off back and forth. I mean, cars crossing each other through, agricultural fields and whatever. Sometimes we had night shoots at night, and the next morning we had a day shoot for the other. So it was nonstop.
Oh, no, it seems like that hard work paid off. This is such a fun experience, especially for horror fans. Lorenzo, you've been working with horror quite a few times now. What draws you to the genre, and what did you want to bring forth with this entry, venturing once again into horror?
I think the biggest thing about, in particular, Stephen King, is it is as much psychological as it is anything else, as opposed to scares, if you would, right? A lot of horror films really derive their meaning out of being just scary and terrifying and bloody and all that stuff. But King is always picking at just underneath the skin surface of what makes you uncomfortable in your life, or what should make you uncomfortable. It makes you think about it, and I think, this Pet Cemetery really, not just this movie, but any of the Pet Cemeteries really derive their power from the sort of essential question of how far would you go to see a loved one again, right? And that's something that anyone can relate to. They just don't have the means to do it, right? And of course, cautionary tale, and I think it has a lot to do with selfishness too, because it's really a selfish impulse to know that this, whatever this thing is that's coming back to you, it's not the person that you knew, but even a little piece of that person's there, so you want it. So I think that's what keeps me coming back. We did 1408, which was another Stephen King movie, and that is all about the psychological, and that's really interesting. And I think the other thing horror allows you to do is you actually get to do surreal, and in most cases, most movies don't allow you to do surreal. So that's really fun. It's an area that you just don't get to explore. So, you look at each movie and say to yourself, well, one, am I willing to spend years of my life at it? Two, yes, is it going to be successful? And three, also, like, well, what makes it interesting to do? And they're all sort of the same thing.
Yeah, I think as a Stephen King fan, you really nailed a lot of those things we love as that, the scares, the psychological, the surreal, and you nailed that perfectly, especially getting this director for this. Mark, can you speak to bringing Lindsey on board for this project? What was it like? What drew you to her, especially, bringing a lot of good material out of this source material that you had?
Well, we had worked with Lindsey quite a bit as a writer. She had been a part of our Transformers universe, and she was always, very opinionated in that world in a great way, and had a point of view. And we have a tendency to work with the same people throughout our careers, and we like to bring foster careers of people who have higher ambitions. And she had always told us that she wanted to direct. And, when we had this project and decided to make it, we knew that she was a King fan, and went to her to see if she would be interested in starting off this way. And she answered yes immediately, which was a great surprise. And more so, she was a fanatic for the book and knew it better than we did. And, she had...
There was a seminal book in her evolution as a writer.
Exactly. So that's how it happened for us.
Well, Pet Sematary 2 was a seminal film for me growing up. So again, anyone who can make more of these and the original quality to this as well. You have that iconic film, which you guys worked on that remake, but you had to do something a bit different. Lorenzo, can you speak to having a bit more freedom this time around? I've seen interviews about Transformers of like, oh, I get to kind of play around the timelines now. You get to play around the timelines again. What's that like for this?
Well, it's interesting because in the book, the Timmy Baterman chapters, he comes back from World War II. And given the timeline we'd established with the previous movie, it made it bring it to Vietnam. And what was great for me is I grew up in a small town in New England during Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of my sense memories, there's a reason why for instance, the list of names is posted in the hockey rink, because that's what happened at Dartmouth College, where I grew up. It was actually announced during the between periods of like, June 14th, number 246. And, like people,
Wow.
oh yeah, like January 2nd, 2, and so, and Vietnam, I mean, it's clearly a time where America lost a lot of its innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of continuous with that. It's like, the evil always takes away innocence, doesn't it? And so I think there was a real symmetry to it that was fortunate, but we didn't foresee when we were like, all right, we need the timeline to line up properly. And then when we saw Vietnam, we were like, all right. It's also the juxtaposition of sort of flower children against the idea of, so that there's some things that maybe are not as obvious when you watch it, but they were operating for us as we approached it.
Yeah, I've never heard someone be so shady about someone going to the Peace Corps. I was like, oh my God, let this man go. Like, let him try to bring peace. I love those little touches you guys brought to that. I also love the inclusion of more women in a Pet Sematary story, also the Native American characters. Was that a conscious decision to kind of flesh out this universe more? We've seen such a small glimpse of this, and you guys fleshed this out so well. Was that a conscious choice?
It was. I mean, we almost fleshed it out too well, because the finished film, we had to cut away we had so many threads and characters and stories to tell, and we needed to boil it down in the editorial process. But yeah, I mean, the chapter in the book is fairly short, and it doesn't, dictate a lot of this information that's in the movie, and a lot of the characters we had to make up. But Lindsey was really obsessed with this idea of, this repeating theme for conquest, right? Vietnam was a conquest, and then when the settlers came to this town, this was another conquest, and with the responsibilities that come with that, conquest of a place. And we had driven out the Native American tribes who were protecting the world from this evil spot, to the pet cemetery or the burial ground. And so that guided us, in so many ways, to Donna and Manny characters as not literal ancestors of those tribes, but people who were connected to the land in a different way, from, the white settler family still there in Ludlow.
And I think the other thing is, King on purpose doesn't describe too much in the book about what is the Wendigo exactly, and
Yeah.
when we tried to do it in our previous movie, it got more. The more we tried to describe it, the less it made sense. So we ended up really condensing it in the previous movie, but this movie had the opportunity to really explore the sense of like, well, the Indians didn't bring it here. It pre-exists before them. So there's a lot of really brainstorming around, okay, so what is it like? And really it comes down to basic evil. And so you can't really describe basic evil.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trap that can exist when you try to describe it or personify it. And in this case, it's stronger when you don't personify it. I mean, in a slasher movie, it's personified by the ones who's doing the slashing, right? So it may be terrifying, but it in a way, it doesn't affect your life.
Yeah. No, thank you guys so much. I can hear you guys speak about movies forever. That was really great. Thank you guys so much. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your film festival as well.